Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing well, as I always say. In this video, I have a bunch of stories submitted to me by a viewer named Riggs S, and there's a lot of stories and they're all great, so I figured why not make a whole video of them. So strap in, pull up a stump, and if you're wondering how to pull up a stump, then you just hit that red subscribe button down below. Just gonna show my stuff here for a second. And then yeah, after you do that, it's all good and let's jump in. Thank you for watching. So I'm writing this on my phone because I figured that I should share my experiences. I've shared one already, but I figured I should share more as I have had quite the run-ins with some odd things in the woods of the Pacific Northwest. I live in Oregon, but I do tend to travel in my off time in the wilderness. Despite my run-ins, I love the forest, nature, and all that stuff. I just tend to be much more careful now. This first story takes place in my home state. I have a buddy who's a park ranger, and he shared with me a story of his own. He works at Crater Lake National Park and was patrolling one of the trails that were reported by hikers who said they'd heard a bear in the area. He went out with a tranquilizer to move the bear out of the area because it was close to a campground. He was just walking as usual, and then he felt eyes on him. He began to hear some movement in the woods, and he shouted out, "Is there anybody there?" No response. He got his tranquilizer ready and proceeded towards the noise, but as he approached, he heard another noise behind him. Now he was thinking, "Oh no, there's more than one out here." Not sure what to do, he prepared for the worst. Then to his relief, it was 2 deer. He sighed in relief, thanking God that he wasn't going to be mauled that day. But suddenly, he noticed blood on one of the deer's antlers, and next to it, behind the bushes it came out of, was the carcass of a black bear. The 2 deer just stared at him and returned to feasting on the bear. He wasn't sure what to do, tranquilize them or risk being a victim. He decided it was best to take the shot, and he hit both. They didn't even budge and just walked off into the forest. He reported the dead carcass of the bear and just had a team remove its remains. Still gives him chills thinking back to that day. The next story was when I was on a fishing trip with a friend in Washington. We had set out to fish along this river that was calm that day. We caught a few fish and even some crawdads. I love seafood, so I wanted us to stay out a little longer to catch a few more fish. My friend ended up taking a nap while I continued. All was well, but I suddenly noticed something in the distance. Something long and dark, moving along the river. I thought it was some sort of log that was stuck and got free and was just floating along the river, but its movements didn't appear to be normal. It would move back and forth, getting closer and closer. I began to get nervous. I can't explain why, I just felt like I needed to get away from whatever this thing was. I turned to my friend who was still asleep and I heard a splash. I looked back and the thing was just gone. I looked around wondering where it went, and then I saw it, perched on top of a tree. I thought it might have been a cougar. I grabbed my binoculars for a closer look, and it was crouched, but was tall, lanky, and had milky white eyes, but covered in black feathers and wearing some sort of animal pelt. I felt a sudden sense of dread and fear that I have never felt before. I looked back to my friend to wake him, but before I could, I heard another splash, and it was back in the water, and now headed to the boat. I said, "F this," and I turned on the motor and hauled ass out of there. My friend woke up yelling at me and asked, "What the hell are you doing?" But I didn't respond. When we got to the loading dock, I anchored the boat and told him to get in the truck, and he protested about leaving the boat there, and I said, "We'll get it later. Get in now." On the car ride back, I explained everything, and I saw how pale he got. He's part Native American, and he explained to me that what I saw was a skinwalker. This next story takes place in the Canadian wilderness. I was on a hunting trip with my buddy who has a cabin in Canada deep in the wilderness, an off-grid type of deal. It was the beginning of winter, so the snow wasn't so bad where you just couldn't move. He had this goal to get a mountain lion, So he headed out to a ridge where you could see out a clearing where he said he saw this specific mountain lion every year. It always came to the same spot. Maybe its home was nearby, I don't know. So it's nighttime, and we had a small fire going. I went to go take a piss when I noticed something, or some things. 3 humanoid figures were in the clearing. I quickly put the fire out. My friend tells me, "Dude, why did you do that?" I told him to shush, and we observed the 3 beings. The thing was, this was way out in the middle of the wilderness. There's absolutely no way that anybody else knew about this spot. Also, the 3 figures looked human, but I could tell they were much taller than normal. Their arms were skinny and just moved unnaturally. They were circling something, but I couldn't tell what exactly. Then one of the figures stopped and looked directly at us. We rushed to cover, but didn't really know what to do, so we decided not to sleep that night and have our rifles ready just in case. The following morning, we went down to the clearing to see what those figures were circling, and sure enough, we saw footprints much larger than a normal human, and then the beheaded mountain lion that my friend wanted to mount on his cabin so badly, but now, not so much. This story still comes to mind to this day. Me and my buddy from our hiking club were going on a hike one day. It was this beautiful hike along a river, and we were looking for places to set up camp. We saw a campground with food and trash everywhere, and at first I was upset that someone would just leave this much of a mess here. But the longer I looked around, the weirder things got. Their trash bag was still hoisted up on a tree branch, but it was ripped open, and if a bear or another animal got to the food, they would have eaten everything. Also, their tents were set up, but ripped as if from the inside. The clothes were still around, and even 2 pairs of boots. The whole campground looked as if whoever was there immediately was in a rush to get out of there, and just left all their belongings, not even bothering to take their shoes. The hairs on my neck stood up, and both my buddy and I decided that we should just call it a day and hike back to the car. I reported the incident to the forest rangers, but they said they weren't aware of anybody camping in the area and didn't receive any reports from that area. It still freaks me out thinking what could have spooked these people so bad that they left their tents, not even bothering to use the zipper, and just leaving their clothes and shoes behind. This next one comes from a solo hike. I was doing a 3-day solo trip somewhere in Washington near the Canadian border. I was literally way out there, no facilities or normal campgrounds. I was just hiking along, and as dusk was approaching, my campsite was already set. I just went for a stroll when I thought I heard a child's voice calling for help. I thought it was my imagination, but then I heard it again. I began to follow it, and then I saw the child. He looked dirty. The clothes were still intact, but his back was facing me. I called out to this kid and he turned around, but before he could speak, he was pulled down by someone or something down to the other side of the hill. Then I heard a loud crash as if a metal door shut. I ran to where the kid was and I saw nothing but the same clothes he was wearing, neatly folded, and his shoes right next to them. After a few minutes to no avail, I made my way back to the campsite, gathered all my things, and headed back. I went to the forest ranger station and told them what I saw. Never found out if they found that kid or not. Now this story comes from my close friend in Oregon, but this happened in Washington. So I was hanging out with my friend who has pretty much grew up in the outdoors all his life, and I asked him what his most creepy experience in the woods was. He told me he didn't have a lot of experiences like that, aside from hearing weird things at night when he went camping. But this one time he was out hiking with his dog. Usually they are a pair for hiking with friends, but this time he was out hiking with just his dog in the deep woods of Washington, on a trail that had very little traffic, like you wouldn't expect to run into anybody. So his dog is off-leash, roaming a little in front of him, and as they come to a corner, the dog just stopped, and his hair stood up on the back of his neck, did a single bark, moved up one step, and then just ran behind my friend. And like not behind his legs, but back down the trail behind my friend about 25 yards. My friend pulled out his firearm and aimed forward. Considering this was an area where black bears are, he thought that maybe his dog saw a bear. But after a few minutes he didn't find anything. No animals. Nothing. His dog refused to go near him even after he kept calling for it. He eventually left the trail with his dog and got back home in one piece, but he said he never saw his dog act like that. His dog and him have hiked plenty, and his dog has been spooked before, but he's never acted that way, and he would always come back after being called, even when he was spooked. This story occurred when I was hunting with my buddy in Washington. The area still has trees, but it's on the drier side, with us being closer to the desert. We had a deer blind set up near a clearing and scanned the area for some deer when we noticed a big elk with a couple of doe. They were grazing and we just watched since we didn't want this deer. What was odd though was that the weather began to get rainy and fog rolled in as evening was approaching. We noticed that the elk began to showcase defensive behavior, going back and forth making grunting noises and huffing as it began to set up a defensive area around the doe who was now cowering in a small area. Kind of like, back up, these are mine. The elk was staring at the tree line and we thought, oh shit, maybe it's like a bear or something. But to our surprise, it wasn't. It was another elk. We got a little excited thinking that we were going to see these two elk go at it and to see who gets to take the herd of doe home. But I stopped once I put it together. Why was the doe afraid of them? Then I saw another elk, and another, all just staring at the protective elk. But then, to our shock, all the elks began to stand on two legs. Now sometimes deer will do this as a protective thing or like a display behavior of superiority, but these elk were not. The protective elk began to show more and more aggression, attempting to scare them off. My friend whispered to me, "What the hell is this? I've never seen this before in my life." My friend has been hunting for over 15 years from Alaska all the way to Colorado and parts of the East Coast, a seasoned man who didn't scare easily, but I could tell this was freaking him out. The group of bipedal elk just stood there, and then they all bolted towards the elk, and the elk charged at them at the same time, managing to impale two of the elks, but he was outnumbered, and the elks didn't use their antlers, but they began to bite the other elk with what looked like jagged fangs. It was horrible. Then they circled the elk and just looked up to the moon and made these god-awful gurgling noises. It honestly looked like some kind of effed up ritual. We decided that we should just leave, and began to grab our things to get out of there. I'm positive that we were too far for anyone to hear, but I swear as soon as we moved, one of the deer stopped and looked right at us. And that's when we noped out of there and ran all the way back to the truck, hoping we didn't run into these elks or whatever the hell those things were. I've seen deer display hostile behavior, but never like that. We were rushing to throw our stuff on the truck and sped out into the dirt road. We got about a quarter mile away when we noticed a giant log blocking our path that wasn't there before. My friend said, "Damn it, we have to move it." Luckily, we had a chainsaw in the back, and he cut some of the logs away so we could move it, but my god, those logs were heavy. When we got to the last log of the road, my friend said, "Help me move it." I joined in, and we both lifted the last log out of the way when we noticed something on the road. It was one of those deer, just standing looking at us. We backed up towards the truck, and my friend not even caring to grab the chainsaw, and I swear this thing opened its mouth and said, "Help me move it." It was distorted, but it sounded like my friend. We just ran back to the truck from there, and we hit the gas, and this deer just ran towards the truck and hopped on the front and then was trying to get on the top. And I'm just shitting bricks at this point and attempting to grab the shotgun from under the seat when my friend says, "Hang on," and just hits the brakes really hard, and this deer just goes flying off the truck, and he quickly speeds around it. We stayed at a hotel after driving 2 hours straight to get back to civilization. Honestly, I just believe deer have some messed up ways, but I really don't know what they were. But I'm positive they weren't deer. I don't know what they were. And before I get to the next few, I just want to say that these experiences have forever changed my perspective on the woods, and I question whether I should step foot in the woods again. I don't know why I attract these experiences, but part of it motivates me to keep going, to share what I see. So this other story was a time that I went out with a friend to explore. We were in the back country just exploring, and I suddenly saw this weird structure. My friend decided that we should check it out, and we saw this stone-like structure covered in moss that must have been there for decades. What was weird though was that it had this rectangular structure that had a door. The door was perfectly preserved, as if someone just installed it. There was no rust on the door handle or any weather damage. It was like it just came fresh out of the store. I went to get a closer look, and I was about to try to open the door when my internal gut feeling was screaming to me that something was wrong and we should not be there. And the extreme sense of fear flooded my entire being, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. My friend said, "What's wrong?" I told him maybe we should just go. And he said, "We can't just leave now, let's see what's inside." And just as I fought my fear off and I went for the door handle, the door began to creak open, and I felt something was just very wrong. I think my friend just instinctively knew that we had to run, and we just got the hell out of Dodge. We returned with more people and armed to the teeth to try the door again. But we couldn't find the structure anywhere, despite me marking this area on my map before we even attempted to go to the door. I always wondered what would have happened if I opened that door. In this next story, I was camping with my old roommate, and we were enjoying the night and headed to bed soon after our fire was put out. Around 3 in the morning, I had to piss, so I went to a tree that was at the edge of our campsite. I heard movement after I finished, and I thought it was my friend having to do the same. A few feet away, I gave him the OK hand sign and he gave it back. But the way his fingers moved looked just wrong. I thought maybe I was just tired and I headed back to my tent. The following morning we made breakfast and I mentioned to him how I drank too much the night before, and I don't like having to piss at night, but at least I wasn't the only one that had to go. My friend looked really confused at the last part and he said, "What do you mean the only one?" I said, "You don't remember? We went to pee at the same time." Then I showed him the OK hand gesture I gave him last night to jog his memory, and he just said, "Dude, I didn't get up at all last night." A chill ran up my spine, and I just played it off that I must have been dreaming. I don't know who or what that was last night, but we never saw anybody out there, and I checked around the campsite after breakfast for footprints, and I saw mine, but nobody else's where I thought I saw my friend the night before. And this next one is just like the previous one. I was camping with my girlfriend at the time, and we had a great night doing, couple things, and then in the middle of the night I had to piss, so I did my business at a nearby tree, and then I heard my girlfriend calling my name in the woods. I figured that she had to go and just wanted some privacy. Maybe she needed toilet paper and forgot. I went to the tent to grab a roll, but then I heard her call my name again, and she was saying, "Help me." I thought about going over to her, but I went to grab the roll anyways because I didn't want to go over there and then she tells me that she needs toilet paper. As I opened the tent, I just stood there surprised that my girlfriend was sound asleep still. So, who was calling my name? I heard my name again but louder, in my girlfriend's voice saying, "Come here, now." I just decided to go in the tent and just laid there silent, not sure what to do. I didn't hear anything for the rest of the night and passed out after the surge of adrenaline just put me out. I never told my girlfriend about it. I just told her that we had to cut the trip short because I forgot that I had a paper to write. And this last one happened in 2019. I took a drive on a forest road about 45 minutes in and parked near this trailhead and took off down the trail. I was admiring the flora and fauna and just going on a normal hike when I noticed my vision completely changed. It's as if I was looking through prescription glasses that weren't mine. The vegetation changed and it was daylight when I was hiking, but now it was like dark as if sunset had just passed. This happens almost instantly. It was like I was in a completely new environment. Then I felt something graze my shoulder. It was a hairy arm, like the one you'd see from an ape or a Bigfoot, and it was about to grab me, but I managed to take a step back just to see the hand grab where my neck would have been. I felt this sudden sense of dread, and I just began to backpedal, and after a couple of steps my vision went back to normal. The sunlight returned, just as well as the flora and fauna. I just saw a fuzzy outline in a circular shape in front of me from where I just stepped out of, and it eventually disappeared the more steps back I took. I just stood there, completely shocked as to what just happened, and I came to my senses as my internal red flags were going off, and I just turned around and ran back to my truck and got out of the area. I never had this happen to me before, and thank me it has never happened since. Since this happened, I never go hiking alone again. And to end this off, I just wanted to add that I enjoy the woods and nature in its full beauty and wonder, but there are things out there, things that even the natives knew to stay away from. There are things out there that don't care about you or that you have families or loved ones. I still go out into the woods, but after the last experience, it took me a long time to get the courage to go out there again. I never go out for solo hikes anymore. And if I can't go with someone, I always take my dog. Thanks for hearing my stories, and I'll be sure to send in any future experiences I have. So I just want to say thank you again to Riggs S for sending in all those stories. They were pretty great, really. And of course, let me know what you think. Do you have any stories of your own? You can feel free to send them in at the email in the description. And if you notice that my voice sounds a little different, it's because I finally got a new mic. So yeah, I hope you liked those stories as much as I liked reading them. And yeah, please send in your own if you have any, or just leave a comment telling me what you thought of these ones. Anyways, thank you for always watching the videos, and I will see you in the next one. See you all later.